Hey guys, welcome to Question of Strength, where, the title says it all, I answer your questions. I also give you my opinion on some current topic, either a recent research I've seen, maybe an exercise I've experimented with, or maybe a debate that I've seen on social media. Now, the topic I want to discuss first before we get to all right, sorry about that. Just a mix up with the video. Anyway, so the topic I want to cover today is the role or the effectiveness of machines versus free weights for various goals. I want to mention that topic because there were two recently published studies that were very interesting to me. One in particular because the first one uh, basically confirmed what we've been mostly believed. Uh, where first, when I say we, I mean the people who are very hardcore lifters who train seriously. What we found is that for hypertrophy specifically, machines are just as effective as free weights can be. In fact, machines can offer several benefits. For example, by being a more stable movement, it allows you to use more of the central drive from the nervous system to activate the muscle you're trying to train rather than split that neural drive over several different muscles that would be involved more in stabilization, fixation, also controlling your posture, stuff like that. So the more stable the movement can be, the more you can send that drive directly to the muscle you're trying to stimulate, making for a stronger growth stimulus. Because the stronger the drive is, the easier it is to recruit the growth prone, fast twitch muscle fibers, which makes for more effective hypertrophy training. Now, that first study also found, quite surprisingly, that strength gains were similar when it comes to machine training or free weight training. Now, don't get me wrong. I mean, if you're a powerlifter and your goal is to perform well on the squat, bench, and deadlift, you'll have to train on the squat, bench, and deadlift and their variations if you want to improve optimally on those lifts. The reason is that those movements are not only about muscle strength, they are also about technique, about motor skill, about efficiency of your movement. And the more you practice that movement, the better you are at displaying the muscle strength that you have. Okay, so but simply from getting the muscles themselves stronger, machines are as effective as free weights are. So either your goal is strength or size. If you want to use machines and you don't plan on competing in a barbell competition, for example, if you're training for powerlifting, if you're training for strongman, for Olympic weightlifting, for CrossFit, then you probably need to lift free weights because that's part of your competition. So you need to be skilled at lifting those, doing those movements. Whereas if you only care about getting those muscles stronger, that then machines can do just fine with probably a less uh, danger regarding injuries, for example. Now, the second study by the same research group, by the way, I'm going to try to post the studies in the comment section of this YouTube video. The second study was more surprising because they actually looked at the impact of training on machines and training on free weights on several, I would say, athletic movements or functional skills. For example, vertical jump, sprinting, or balance test. And what they found was that after 8 weeks of training, either on free weights or on machines, they used the same exercises. For example, they would use a chest press, they would use a squat motion, and so on and so forth. But using either free weights or machine, that was the only difference. The other training parameters were the same. And what they found was that the the gains in functional capacities were the same regardless of the athletes trained on machines or on free weights. So sprinting performance, jumping performance, and balance results were the same. That was actually quite surprising to me. And again, there are some caveats, but it does indicate that machines might not be as ineffective as once thought for athletes. Now, I still prefer to train with free weights with athletes because I believe that there are other benefits like lower absorption that are best trained with free weights, for example. Also, they might be more challenging on the nervous system, which probably develop the skill of learning new movements and also controlling the body in space. and maybe sending a stronger excitatory drive. But that's for further discussion. But what these two studies tell us is that machines can be just as effective as free weights. Now, there are some benefits to machine training, just as like there are some drawbacks that kind of even things out. Okay, machines. What I like about machines is that you can more easily train at a very high level of effort. Getting closer to failure, for example, is safer and more easily done on machines. What I mean more easily done is that you can get close to failure without as much compensations occurring. Like, for example, when you are doing a a free weight squat, then when you approach those very hard reps, there's a chance that you will compensate fatigue by shifting your position, for example, bending forward, to overuse some muscles that are less tired than the prime movers. That obviously allows you to get more reps, but might not be more effective at stimulating the muscles you want to hit. So if you're doing a leg press, for example, or a hack squat machine, you really can't do those compensation, or at least not as much. Same thing on a bench press, same thing on many different movements. So it's easier to train close to failure on machines. It's also less draining to do so. Machine exercises are arguably less demanding on the nervous system because, well, the drive is really focused on that one muscle. There are no like other muscles that need to be activated to maintain posture, to stabilize the body, to fix the body, and stuff like that. The machine is doing that for you, right? And there's also less involvement of the motor cortex in controlling the movement in space. So it's less challenging for the nervous system, which means that going to failure on free weights has a double whammy on the nervous system of being hard because of the complexity of the movement, but also being hard because you're going to failure or close to failure. Whereas if you go on machines, then it's much easier on the nervous system and less likely to burn yourself out. Now, of course, that is if your training model insists that you are going to failure or close to it. In that case, machines might be superior, especially if your goal is hypertrophy. Okay. Now, another benefit of machines is that the injury risk is lower for many of the same reasons. You cannot shift or twist as much as you would on a free weight. And you cannot, even if you lose control of the weight, the machine is still holding up for you. If you fail the movement, you can just like bring the weight back. It's going to be on the stack. That's no problem. Whereas if you miss a squat, you forgot to put safety pins on, then you're going to pray for your life, right? So that would be some benefits of machine exercise. Also, because they're less draining on the nervous system, you can either recover faster from your workouts or maybe even do a bit more volume for the same amount of neural energy involved. Now, when it comes to free weight, I believe that there are also some benefits. Obviously, I still use them with athletes, and in fact, it's the biggest tool I'm using with athletes. First of all, is that there is such a thing as developing your general skill at controlling your body in space, which machines might not train as much. I know that the second study I mentioned did find that balance results were the same, but there's a difference between those balance tests and actually being able to control your body in a tridimensional space when you're playing sports. And you have to quickly make adjustments and stuff like that. I believe that free weight exercises train you a little bit better for that, simply for the fact that you have to hold your body in space and move to that space and compensate for some movements or not. So you have to maintain your balance, maintain your posture better. So that I would see a benefit for that. I also would see a benefit on some free weight movements like squat, deadlift, cleans, maybe even overhead press, on being a super core exercise. What I mean by that is if you're doing a squat, a deadlift, any way that you're standing up and you have to hold a weight, the core, the abdominal, lower back, quadratus lumborum, and all those muscles that stabilize your trunk are a lot more active than if you're doing a machine. So that I believe that training that can transfer better to being more solid, more stable in sports. Of course, that is more of a long-term adaptation. To me, I'm reminded of a French track and field coach, Thierry Blancon, who equated the squat and deadlift to a super plank exercise. And he actually thought, that's his theory, that the main benefit of the big free weight lifts on athletes is mostly as a way to train the body to support heavy loads and strengthen the core. That would be the main benefit in his theory. So obviously you don't get that as much with machines. And I also believe that free weights are more challenging on the nervous system because they have to coordinate a more complex movement. They have to coordinate more different muscles working at the same time. So by increasing the challenge on the nervous system, yes, it's more tiring, but the flip side is that it can lead to positive adaptation, making you for a stronger nervous system, which can be a good investment in the future because it means that if you strengthen the nervous system, then you're going to be less impacted by central fatigue and your workouts will be less draining. So I certainly believe that free weights should still be a big component of athletic training and even hypertrophy training, especially in the earlier stages of training to build that central capacity. All right, so let's get down to your questions. Again, you can always post questions on the YouTube live top chat here, or I can go on my own list. So one question here on the live. Last week you said join the club when I mentioned my chronic adductor tear, implying that you have the same thing happen. If so, I was just wondering what the story about it and how it has affected you long term. Well, what actually happened is I want to say a year and a half ago. My main goal was to get back to my former personal best on things like the sprint and vertical jump. My best sprint all time on 40-yard dash was a 4.5440 laser timed, and my best vertical jump was 40 inches. So I was training specifically for that. So I was training essentially like a track and field athlete, or like I trained when I was competing in weightlifting and wanted to transition to bobsleigh. So lots of sprinting, jumping, Olympic lifting, and stuff like that. My reasoning is that if I get my performance marker on, let's say, power snatch, back squat, and movements like that back to where they were or close to it, then I would possibly be able to regain my speed and vertical jump. What actually happened, and that actually had nothing to do with my training, is that it was done in the middle of winter, and I was shuffling snow outside, and in my driveway, it must have been like ice underneath the snow because I slipped, almost made a split, and that I pulled my adductor, my left adductor. And me being me, meaning be excessive and sometimes stupid, I continued training pretty much like I was doing. And I was at that point, I had huge compensation. You can actually see when I was jumping unevenly because I was pushing a lot more with my right side. And I found that I could not back squat full range. So I could only do like quarter squat, but I kept doing that and it probably made things worse. It took, I wouldn't say, a good 8 months of basically doing almost no leg training. My leg training was essentially deadlift, which I could do with a very narrow stance, like feet almost together. I could do that. And leg extension and leg curls to maintain the size. That was basically all I did for legs. After that 8 months period, I was able to squat again. But I find that even now, when the load gets heavy, then I feel the adductor pull. But again, my goal at the moment is mostly hypertrophy related. So I'm relying more on machines now. So I find that if the machine is stable, like a hack squat machine, like a leg press machine, I can actually reach full depth and don't have any issue with the adductor. Also, it allows me to have a very narrow stance, which reduces the adductor strain. That's pretty much what I did, and that worked for me. All right, some more questions. And again, don't hesitate to write your question down. Either I will answer it during this live or I will answer it in the next one. Sir, for first question, what's the best training split if you are training 5 days a week? Is it a push-pull leg or bro split? All right. So push-pull leg, essentially what it is you have one workout where you do all the pushing muscles. And it would be chest, deltoid, and triceps mostly. Then a second workout, you do all the pulling muscle, which would be your back, your traps, your biceps. Then you would have a leg workout, which would be quadriceps, hamstring, glutes, calves. Okay, and then you would rotate through that. That's just for explaining the workout. A bro split, well, bro split can be many things, right? And bro split can actually train two muscles in one workout. It could be chest and biceps, or chest and triceps. It could be back and for example, like Dorian Yates was using what could be called a bro split, and he was doing chest and biceps. Then he was doing legs. Then he was doing back by itself. Then he was doing shoulders and triceps. But basically, a bro split is a split where you train only one or maybe two muscle. If you train two muscles in a workout, it's going to be a small muscle and a big muscle. But it could be one muscle per day, for example. You could do something like a chest workout, a leg workout, a back workout, a shoulder workout, and an arms workout. For example, that could be an example of a bro split. But there are many different applications of a bro split. But basically, bro split meaning that you focus on one, maybe two muscle. Whereas if you're doing a push-pull leg, you're focusing on a single function per workout, and every muscle involved in that function is being trained in that workout. Now, which one is best if you're going to train 5 days a week? 5 days a week, first of all, that's a pretty high frequency for most people. I'm not saying not to do that. I typically start people at 4 days a week. And my normal schedule is Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Saturday, with Saturday being an easier workout. So, for example, in the case of a push-pull leg workout, we could do push-pull legs on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and Saturday could be a gap workout. A gap workout is an easier session where you focus on lagging muscle groups. It could be arms, it could be hamstring, it could be calves, just muscles you either want to emphasize more or you feel are lagging. Okay, now that would be an example. If you want to train 5 days a week, a push-pull leg split, what you would do is you would rotate through the workout. So, for example, first week, let's say you train Monday through Friday, and it's going to be Monday push, Tuesday pull, Wednesday leg, Thursday push, Friday pull. Then the next week you would start with Monday legs. So you're not always training, for example, push on Monday. It would be rotated through, right? So that would be the way I would do a push-pull leg split. Now, the bro split, normally you would use a more static schedule. So if you're training 5 days a week, you could train, for example, chest one day, you could train legs one day, you could train back, and you can train shoulders, and you can train arms. That could be an example of a typical bro split. Then all the workouts would be for the same muscles on the same day of the week. Now, which one is better is entirely dependent on your training style. If you're someone who loves, let's say, volume training. By volume training, I mean typically doing between, I want to say, 9 and 15, 16 work sets per muscle in a workout. Okay, that would be my definition of volume training. Of course, some people are much higher than that, but let's just start at the 9 to 16 work set as the volume approach. It could be more than that for some muscles. Now, if you're using more of a volume approach, then the push-pull leg split isn't really applicable, or it's unpractical. It's going to make the workouts way too long. If you have, let's say, 12 work sets per muscle, and you have 3 muscles in a workout, and even 4 muscles if you're doing a pulling workout or a leg workout, that's going to go way too much volume. You're going to have between 45 and maybe up to 60 sets per workout. That's just going to be too much work for one session. It's going to be unpractical from a time perspective, and it's also going to be really hard to recover from. Not to mention that the quality of the workout will be pretty much gone after the first muscle is done. So once you've hit, for example, 12 sets for chest, then you want to hit deltoids, you have nothing left. I mean, the nervous system is tired, you have central fatigue. So even if you do the exercises, and even if you go to failure or close to it, you're still not getting the most out of that set because of the central fatigue preventing fast twitch muscle recruitment, right? So a higher volume approach would kind of prevent you from using a push-pull leg split. If you want to use a push-pull leg split, it's much better to use a lower volume, higher effort training. That's a second model of training that we often talk about. It's doing very few work sets per muscle. So it could be anywhere between, let's say, 3 and 6 work sets per muscle. But these work sets are done to failure or very close to it. Okay, basically what you're looking for is making those sets as effective as possible to stimulate growth. So you don't want to leave too many reps in the tank or any reps in the tank at all, because the less reps you leave in the tank, the more effective reps you get in that set. So for example, if you go to failure, one set can be as effective as 2 or 3 sets if you stop 3 reps short of failure. So instead of requiring 15 sets, maybe you only require 5 to get the job done. See what I mean? So that less a need for volume makes the push-pull leg split doable. because now you can do your chest, you can do your shoulders, you can do your triceps. If you only have between 3 and 6 work sets per muscle, that is perfectly doable in that setting, right? If you want to use more volume work because that's what you either believe in, that's what you are motivated of doing, because you can get bigger and you can get stronger by doing volume or by doing higher effort training with low volume. Both work. But the one that will motivate you the most will probably be the most effective long term. So if you are more someone who is motivated by doing volume, feeling that nasty pump, feeling proud of the amount of work you perform in the gym, if you're more of a stimulus addict, like those 30, 45 minutes workout do not satisfy you, then you need probably a more of a volume based approach, in which case more of a bro split is likely going to be a better option. Because if you train 3 muscles or even 4 muscles in a workout, it's going to be way too long of a workout. If you are someone who loves very high effort and low volume training, then the push pull leg split is probably going to be your best option in that situation. All right. So let's get on with our next question. All right, from the live here, any suggestion for warming up the knees for legs? Always seem the slowest part to get started when working out. Everybody seems to need very little to get started. Yeah, the best strategy, and I'm not going to be the first one to recommend that one. John Meadows was the first one to recommend it. Was doing like 3 or 4 sets of leg curls before doing any form of squatting or leg pressing movement. So that would be the first thing you might want to look into. By creating that pump there, or that the knee flexion action would increase the amount of synovial fluid in the knee. That would actually help you grease the groove before you're gonna go squatting. Now, another method you could use, I use that actually with strongman Jean-François Caron. He's a Canadian strongman, placed top 3 in the world strongest man a few times. He suffered a double patellar tendon tear during a competition. You've probably seen a video on YouTube. If not, look for it, like JF Caron injury. He was doing a log clean and press. He had like something like 450, and he slipped. So the flooring was slippery. He slipped and he fell down, and the log dropped down on both knees, severing both patellar tendons. So during his rehab period, when he was focusing on like regaining the capacity to squat, but that was after his initial, I want to say, physiotherapy. I mean, he was good to go. He could do full squat mechanically, but it was very hard for him to get into that squatting form. So what we would do is walk backwards on a treadmill. So you go on a treadmill. You don't open it. You don't start it because just by walking backwards with no activation, it's still resistant. So you go on a treadmill, you squat down into something like a quarter squat, and you walk backwards, focusing on really extending the knee. You do that for 5 to 10 minutes. I found that when we did that, then we did the leg curls. You could actually squat, full squat, with no technical issue and no pain. So that would be my main recommendation. All right, one more question from the live. I just started following your fat loss protocol. I'm doing a full body, upper, lower, arms, calves, abs split. That's a weird split. With a single max out set like Dorian Yates. Okay, that's what I'm doing too. Is that a suitable approach for strength training? Yeah, I mean, the split is, I want to say, the least important part of your training variables. As long as it fits with the style of training you're doing, then any split can potentially work. So if you look at your split, first of all, the fact that you are doing like the one hard work set per exercise kind of open up the choice of which split you can use. So a full body, in my opinion, it can either be done for, let's say, athletes, but with minimal exercises. So, for example, when I train athletes, we use a whole body approach, and we have like 3 main lifts. We're going to squat, a press, a hinge and a pull. So for like four main exercises. So that's doable. But if you're using a whole body as more of an hypertrophy protocol, then you kind of have to use a low volume approach, because just if you only have one exercise per muscle, it's still six-ish exercises. And if you do 4 sets or 5 sets plus warm-ups, that's going to be a lot of volume to recover from. So yeah, full body on your first day, upper body, lower body, upper body second day, lower body third day, and then you have a gap workout where you work arms, calves, and abs, so smaller muscles. So I don't have an issue with the upper and lower afterwards, as long as you do have a rest day between the full body workout and the first, like the upper body workout. Because in a full body workout, you're gonna hit each muscle pretty hard if you go to failure. So going to an upper body workout the next day might be suboptimal, because you won't be able to perform as best as you should. So yeah, the split, whole body, then upper body, then lower body, then a smaller workout of arms, calves, and abs would probably be best done on my typical training split, which is Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and Saturday. If you do that, it's perfectly fine. And you do 20, 45 minutes. All right, and I have more detail on that approach, but certainly doing the steady state cardio, if you keep it under 120 beats per minute, can be easily done on those off days. Now, if you turn that into higher intensity energy system works on the rest day, then that's going to interfere with your recovery and probably hurt the performance in your strength workout, which we don't want. All right. For male ballet dancer, exercises to achieve higher jumps. Ironically, I actually trained a ballet dancer. She was also in the Cirque du Soleil. She actually worked for me as a trainer. She was a freak athlete. She could, on any given day, compete in powerlifting, compete in Olympic weightlifting, did a physique competition, and do a ballet recital in the evening. She was just that kind of an athlete. Now, the one thing I noticed with ballet dancer is that because of all the stretching they do, they have almost no stretch reflex. Almost no stretch reflex. And I believe so. I believe that like typical plyometrics will not help them, because they cannot rely on the stretch reflex to jump higher. Okay, so they need to rely on muscle strength and muscle power to jump higher. Now, if you look at the various types of jump exercises, a jump exercise can either amplify or bias the muscle component, which is what you want, or it can emphasize the elastic or reflexive component, which would be someone who can use a stretch reflex. I mean, ballet dancer will never be able to use a stretch reflex, because even if you train for it, you will still inhibit way too much for it to be a significant part of your power production. So if you look at the types of jumps that will favor the muscles as far as power production is concerned, first you have soft surfaces or soft surface jumps. So jumping or various jump exercises on a soft surface could be a gymnastic mat, could be sand, could be grass, anything that is very soft. The reason that the softer the surface is, the less the reflexes can be used. Okay, when you absorb force, it is dissipated into that soft land, that soft surface. Whereas if it's a hard surface, it's kind of like it's a flooring that keeps the stretch reflex or the tension in a muscle and tendon. So if you have a soft surface, automatically you need to rely more on muscle strength to produce power, which is what you want. So that's the first thing. The second thing would be loaded jumps. Loaded jumps would use roughly, I want to say, between 10 and 20% of your maximum squat, and you would do sets of 3 to 5 reps jumping as high as possible. It could be you're holding a barbell on your back, could be holding a kettlebell here, or my favorite variation, using a trap bar because it's a lot less stressful on the back. So using a loaded jump also reduces the participation of the elastic component and focuses a lot on the muscle's capacity to produce velocity. Okay. Then another option would be to use isodynamic jumps. Isodynamic jumps would be you're starting a jump from a static position. So, for example, you're going to squat down into a quarter squat, pause for 3 seconds, then jump as high as possible from that position. Okay, you don't recoil, you don't rebend before jumping, you jump straight from that position. You could also jump from a bench. You're seated on a bench and you jump as high as you can. That will also decrease the participation of the stretch reflex, focusing more on the muscle component of power production. Now, you can obviously mix and match those methods. You could do statodynamic jumps on a soft surface. You could do statodynamic jumps with weights. But the point is, the best exercises for you would be the jumps and loaded jumps that emphasize the muscle component. From a soft surface, loaded jumps, or isodynamic jumps. If you are competent in the Olympic lifts, then the power snatch from the hang and power clean from the hang would also be very good options. All right, that's a good question. All right. What is the use of lift specialized in tempo and rep count for hypertrophy if you are training on the mat strength for grappling? Okay, I'm gonna try to understand that question. Why? Okay, so okay, I'm gonna try and attempt to understand it. So you're asking if higher reps and longer tempo, so slower movement, is going to be something that will be useful as a grappling athlete. Well, first of all, hypertrophy or longer tempos and long higher reps are not more effective for growth. Okay, if you just look at the number of reps, if you go to failure, you're going to have roughly 5 effective reps in your set. That's true regardless if you do 5 reps or if you do 30 reps. So the longer reps will not give you more hypertrophy. Okay, so that's the first part of your question. The slower tempos, okay, will not give you a lot more hypertrophy either. The exception is if you do your reps like this, yeah, going at a slightly slower tempo will be better. But going super slow will not lead to more hypertrophy. Okay, now, so that's the first thing. That's the first part of your question because you did mention hypertrophy. Now, we're going to look at the benefits of that type of training on grappling specifically. Okay, because hypertrophy, if you reach the same level of effort in your set, let's say 1 rep short of failure, if you go 1 rep short of failure with 30 reps or with 5 reps, it's going to be the same thing as far as muscle growth is concerned. But there are side benefits to different types of hypertrophy training. So, for example, if you are using low reps, high load, 4, 5, 6 reps, close to failure, you can get the same hypertrophy as you would with 8 to 10 reps. Okay, but you also have the added benefit of being more effective at strengthening the nervous system and making you stronger. Okay, that's a side benefit. The muscle growth might be the same, but there is a side benefit. Now, if I'm doing sets that will last roughly, I'm going to say 60 to 90 seconds, or it could even be like 50 to 70 seconds, depending on the source, you won't get more growth, but you're going to train anaerobic capacity, maybe even lactic acid or lactate tolerance, which could be important or interesting in many sports, including grappling. So, for example, if you are wrestling with someone on a mat and you are holding those positions and squeezing and turning for 45, 60 seconds, you are in deep lactate state. So if you're better at tolerating it, you're not going to crash as much between rounds, for example, or gas out during the round. So there might be a benefit in training in that zone, not for getting more muscle, but for training the energy system involved in your sport while getting some hypertrophy in the meantime. Okay, so that would be a benefit. Now, if you're also using, for example, methods that are put your body under stress for even longer. Let's say a 3 minutes, like a giant set or superset, then it's going to train you. It will develop more capillaries. It will also improve VO2 max, for example. But if you specifically look at what you're asking, the main benefit of training in those longer durations, so either by using a slower tempo or by using more reps, but finding a set that will fall between 50 and 70 seconds, maybe up to 90 seconds, yeah, you're going to, over time, improve your capacity to tolerate lactate. Now, it doesn't mean that lactate doesn't build up. It means that the lactate, which sends a signal of discomfort to your brain, the brain interprets it. That's the brain decides if it hurts or not, if it inhibits your performance or not. If you are used to training in that state, the same signal doesn't have the same pain perception. See what I mean? The best image I can give you is, let's say you work in a factory, okay? The first week you walk into a factory, it's very noisy, it's aggressive, it like hurts your ears, it actually creates lots of fatigue. You go home and dude, you're freaking tired of your day. But after a month of that, you almost don't notice the noise anymore. And you're certainly not super tired when you come home, okay? The fact is the noise is the same, but you become desensitized to it because you are used to that kind of stimulus. Well, same thing, if you train often in that lactate zone, you become better at tolerating it, which can help you in your sport. Now, when we look at energy-driven sport like that, like especially like anaerobic sports, we have a target of 3 times the duration of the longest effort you're going to produce. So, for example, if I work with a hockey player, the shift will last, let's say, 30, 45 seconds. So sets of 90 seconds in the form of superset or circuits can be useful because it gives them a very large reserve not to crash. If you're grappling, well, most of the time that will kind of be the same. So a set lasting 60, 70, 90 seconds will give you reserve not to crumble when you are in that high lactate state, when you are grappling with someone that is somewhat helpful. All right. We have good questions on the live format today. That's cool. All right. Who is your biggest training influence? For Eternal Warrior style training, is it best to use a full body or push-pull leg approach? Okay, good questions. I'm going to start with the easiest one. So for Eternal Warrior style training, which is more of a pro longevity training, if you want to learn more about the Eternal Warrior type of training, you go on tnation.com and you do a search for Eternal Warrior. You're going to have all the principles. It's basically based on maintaining or improving all the key physical capacity, strength, power, endurance, resistance, mobility, stuff like that. And for that reason, I favor a whole body approach. When I use the Eternal Warrior approach, to me, it's exactly like training an athlete, but without a peaking procedure and with probably a little bit easier methods because we're dealing with people who are looking for pro longevity rather than athletic performance. So we do a little bit less volume and we don't use the craziest method ever. But certainly I use a whole body approach. Why? Because the cornerstone of Eternal Warrior is training all the main physical capacities. So if you want to do that without having to train 9 sessions a week, the only option is really training whole body approach. For example, on Monday, you can train for strength and some power at the end with strength. Then the second day, you could train for speed, strength, and power. Then the third day, you can work on resistance. And then on the off days, you can have endurance in the form of cardio, for example. So that allows you to hit all those main physical capacities without having to train 9 sessions a week. So that's what I would do for Eternal Warrior type of training. And that's what I'm really doing. What are your biggest training influences? It's honestly hard to say because my greatest strength is also my greatest weakness is that I'm not a specialist. I'm a generalist. So there are so many different people that have influenced my training because I want to look at what each person can add to my own system. I do not fall in love with one expert and try to just copy that approach. I can't say that. I mean, I've learned a lot from Charles Poliquin, for example, but if you look at my methods or my programs, they are not remotely close to what Charles Poliquin was doing, because I took from him what I thought was useful for my approach, and I added it to my toolbox, and then I created my systems from that. So honestly, I couldn't say that I have one influence that was bigger than others. I tried to learn a little bit from many people, and surprisingly, many of the coolest thing I've learned was from people who are not even training experts. It might be just walking in the gym and seeing a random dude doing a very cool exercise. I'm trying it and it works great. For example, one exercise that I came up with, I didn't came up with, but I popularized is the kayak row. I mean, John Meadows became big on that movement. Then I recently saw Regan Grimes doing it for his back. Probably doesn't have an idea that I came up with it. Probably took it from Meadows. I actually learned that movement from a random dude in the gym doing it, and it looked, wow, that looks like it would hit the back pretty well. I tried it. I really liked it. So I have a forum, so I use that forum to popularize the movement. So I really can't say that I have one or many influences. I try to learn whenever I can. I don't have this mental mindset that because I'm a training expert, I'm better than anybody, so I can only learn from people who are experts. When I'm in gyms, I look at everybody. That's a default setting I have, and yeah, sometimes they do some stupid shit, but a lot of times they do pretty cool stuff. You know what? I'm gonna try that, and it works. I don't care who comes up with it. I don't care who comes. I just want to try it. If it works, it works. So I really don't have a single or even multiple main influences. How much water to drink per day, taking in hours of physical activity for strength training? Any advice on hydration? Well, the first advice I can give you, and I'm kind of an expert on that because I'm Sir P a lot, meaning that I tend to drink way too much, way too fast, and that actually affect my recovery because I wake up too often at night to pee, because that's something we must consider, right? It's super important to be well hydrated, but if you flush as much water as you come in, then you might actually get dehydrated even if you drink a lot. The main thing I can tell you is the rate at which you're drinking, if that makes sense. So if you're gulping down the water or the fluid, that actually decreases how much water you retain. Okay. Because it actually increases the water content of the bloodstream too much, and the body flushes that out. Okay. So if you want to retain the water or be well hydrated, it's better to sip water than gulp it down. That's the first advice I can give you. And I learned that the hard way because I'm someone who can literally probably gulp down 2 liters in one shot. And for me, because of that, it really isn't hard to drink. I want to say close to 3 gallons per day. I mean, I'm not doing that, but there was a time I was doing that. Okay. Honestly, depending on where you are. Also, one thing that when you consume water, you want to consume electrolytes, because consuming lots of water, okay, can make you dehydrated if you don't have proper electrolytes. The reason is that water intake will decrease the hormones responsible for holding water. So basically, the less water you take in, the more the aldosterone and vasopressin are upregulated, telling your body to hold on to the little water it has. The more you drink, the more you downregulate those hormones, so the more you pee or excrete out. Now, if you fail, electrolytes, okay, sodium, potassium, magnesium, calcium, helps the body retains water, okay, because water is needed for their transport. So if you have electrolytes when you're drinking, you will retain a lot more of that water. Whereas if you drink a lot without electrolytes, you will put your body in a flushing mode and you have nothing to tell your body to hold the water. So the two main advices I can give you is sip your water, don't gulp it down, and as much as possible, consume electrolytes with your fluids. Okay. As far as quantity is concerned, it can range anywhere from 1 gallon to 1.5 gallons, depending on uh, how hot it is, how active you are, how much you're sweating, and stuff like that. The importance of hypertrophy for strength training. Well, it's probably the most important variable. I mean, when you look at getting stronger, The main variables or the main factors are the effectiveness of the nervous system and the muscle strength, the strength potential of your muscles. Now, a bigger muscle will always have a higher strength potential than the smaller muscle. Now, you're going to argue, well, you can have small guys who are lifting more than big guys. Sure. But if the small guy get as big as the large guy, he's going to be way stronger than he is now. Okay. The intra individual differences exist because of leverage, because of nervous system efficiency, stuff like that. Now, when you're focusing on very heavy lifting, so for example, a set of 1 to 3 reps, you are training mostly neurological efficiency, which is essentially, without making things too complicated, neurological efficiency is how good you are at using the strength potential you have. Okay, how good you are at using the strength potential that your muscles have. Okay, so if you have large muscles, your potential is high. If your nervous system is crap, then you won't be able to use that potential. You won't be strong. If you have a small-ish muscle mass with a very efficient nervous system, you can be very strong, yet not display the physique that would warrant that strength. But certainly, if you increase the size of your muscle, you will always increase your potential for strength. So that's why when you look at the way powerlifters trained back in the 70s and 80s, okay, and you had super strong dudes over there without the benefit of the extra supportive lifting gear we have right now. And what they did was essentially train mostly with hypertrophy based training during the earlier part of the training cycle. And only 10 to 12 weeks before a competition, they would switch to a strength based approach, understanding that bigger muscles were stronger muscles. So yeah, I think that it is a very important factor. All right, gonna have maybe 2 more questions or 1 more question because my family is coming back, so I have to give them the room. Any help? Okay, any help who has an eating disorder? After a cut, I become a glutton and ravish food. I used to never do this, but now I fast and walk. Okay, basically what you're asking is when you are cutting down, you are depriving yourself, and because of that, when you go off of your diet or your cutting phase, then you just crave food like crazy and you just can't stop eating. So you're asking for advices here. Well, first of all, I honestly understand your pain because I was like that. I mean, the stories I could give you about gluttony are kind of crazy. I mean, my personal record is gaining 26 pounds in 6 hours. I actually measured myself for posterity. On another different time, I actually ate 24 burgers and 1 fries. That was at Arby's. Back then, they have 5 menu item for $5. So I took 24 burgers and 1 fry, so 5 by 5. I once woke up at 3 a.m. in the morning. There was no food in the house, so I went out and drove to so I can find a 24-hour open convenience store. I bought for $70 of crap. I was lying in my bed with the food surrounding me. I was like taking a bite here, taking a bite here, crying at the same time. And then after 15 minutes, I took all of that and I threw it in the trash, only to go back to the trash 15 minutes later and eat straight out of the trash. So I understand your pain, right? What I noticed is that ever since I stopped using stupidly restrictive dieting, like low carbs and low fat, so essentially only eating protein and doing excessive cardio, I don't have those cravings anymore. I mean, if you do a smart fat loss phase, so you keep your carbs moderate, especially around training, I mean, you are in a deficit, but you're not so eager to get lean that you lose like 5 pounds uh, per week. Then you go to a more what's a smarter approach where you keep carbs in, you have a moderate deficit, so you can lose between 0.5 and 1% of your body weight per week. Then I find you don't really have those rebounds afterwards. But I'm not gonna lie, it's a lot about it is mindset. I find that it's very hard to maintain that lean condition once you're not in that state anymore because you don't have a goal to shoot for. So honestly, my best advice is not to be as restrictive with your diet when you're dieting down, or maybe try shorter periods of diet with interspaced periods of maintenance. So let's say 4 weeks of dieting, 2 weeks maintenance, 4 weeks dieting, 2 weeks maintenance, instead of a 8 to 12 weeks cutting cycle. So you don't have time to have those negative metabolic adaptations, the leptin dropping down, that gives you those cravings. So hopefully it was helpful. Guys, my time is up. So hopefully it was fun. I really appreciate all those questions. I couldn't even get to my listed questions so that because you have a lot of good questions to ask. I hope next week you're here and you ask those great questions again. So guys, I'm going to